Welcome. Scott here. Today I am bringing you another Black Clover mobile video. In this video, I will be covering on the upcoming story Mage, Zora Ideale of the Black Bulls. In general, Zora is a technique attribute type debuffer. His gimmick involving the use of the reflective traps. To allow traps to detonate, Zora need to get his turns fast to set the traps. His skill 1 gives the reflective trap level 1 for a turn to the mage with the highest all attack stats. His skill 2 gives debuff immunity for all allies and inflicts SP-1 and magic attack reduction debuff on all targets. If you have his skill page, the ability will apply his reflective trap level 2 on all allies for 1 turn. His special will give a targeted ally the reflective trap level 3 buff for 2 turns with increased defense buff along with weapon disarm level 3 on the enemy with the highest all attack. Similar to the Thread of Fate Vanessa, Zora combo attack also allows you to remove immortality on the target. With his passives, it helps to improve his survivability by applying damage reduction and improving his speed. His LR passive allows him to gain 15 speed at the start of the battle if you are using him in a mono blue team comp. Zora is one of the fastest units in the game. In that setup he will almost guaranteed to move first if you also gear him with a full advanced speed gear set with a speed stone engraved in his support talent wheel. At LR plus 2, if the reflective trap buff is active, he will gain 30% damage reduction buff on self for a turn. At LR plus 5, on top of the damage reduction buff, if deployed in a mono blue team comp, Zora will apply buff block on the enemy with the highest all attack at the start of the battle. Generally, Zora has very interesting gimmicks and requires a great understanding of the game's speed and mobility mechanics. You will want his traps buff applied at the right juncture. When a target is being attacked with the reflective trap buff, the damage will be reflected back to the attacker with increased damage boost. I will discuss more about the traps buff when I go over the details about his moveset. Zora is heavily reliant on his skill page. Without it, you will miss out his AoE reflect trap buff for the party. His enhancement isn't a necessity for general content. However, for upper tier PvP fights, you want him at least LR plus 2 to boost his survivability. You can't reflect the damage if your unit is killed. When handling opposition Zora team comps, do be mindful of that as well. As he is technically a counter-type mage, you will want to prioritize him giving gear sets that boost his defense and speed. For Arena, the full advanced speed with 2 advanced defense set are the go-to gear sets for him. You can opt to give him a 4 defense piece with 3 small attack pieces set if you want to make him a bit more tankier. So should I pull for him? In my opinion, there isn't a general consensus on whether to pull for a unit. It really depends on whether you are a free-to-play or having a vast roster already. He may not be an attacker, but he is very good if you manage to place his traps at the right juncture. He has one of the most unique kits in the game and works well in both PvE and PvP content. The issue is that you have to balance out between his speed and defense. If he cannot survive long enough, you won't be able to take full advantage of his trap mechanics. If you have Mirioliana, Black Asta or Party William for mono blue team comp build, he is an ideal debuffer support for them. Since defender mages have taunt, you can place your reflective trap buffs on them and the target under the taunt status will be forced to attack them. Also, please do remember he is a story mage. So he will be added to the future banner pools. In the upcoming month banners, he will be included in the mages pool. It is possible to get him while chasing for the future story, seasonal or festival mages. If you want to get him but your resources is low and need to save for the upcoming festival mages, Spirit Dive and possibly the returning Black Asta, I would suggest you to wait since you can always make use of custom selective summon to get a raid up banner when you want to get him. Lastly, an important note about Zora, don't bother to use him if you don't get his skill page. His kit will lose bulk of its effectiveness if you don't have that important skill page. Before I go over his kit in detail, let me talk about the reflective trap mechanic. Unlike most reflect mechanics, the reflective trap in this game won't result the unit with the buff to take 0 damage from the incoming attack. So in other words, if you are using the reflective trap on a target, make sure the unit can survive the incoming attack. The only way to negate the damage is use the invulnerability buff, which is one of the reasons why Vanessa complements Zora pretty well. On the screen, you can see a table showing the types of reflective traps buff that Zora can give. His skill 1 will give reflective trap level 1, which will automatically apply to the unit with the highest all attack for 2 turns. With his skill page, his skill 2 will give reflective trap level 2 buff, which will applies to all allies for a turn. His special will give reflective trap level 3, which will applies to the selected target for 2 turns. All reflective traps will reduce incoming attack damage by 20% and results the attacker to get inflicted with a -1 SP debuff. The amount of damage reflected will increase depends on the level of the trap or the number of traps triggered. The higher the level of the traps, the higher amount of reflective damage will be inflicted on the attacker. If the unit has invulnerability buff active when Zora applies the reflective trap, there won't be incremental reflect damage bonus, only the original damage dealt will be reflected. In general, when the trap buff is applied, 20% of the damage will be reduced and the reflect damage percent will be reflected to the attacker. Let's say if an enemy deals 10,000 damage. If he attacks an ally with reflective trap level 1, the damage received by your ally unit be 8,000 and the damage reflect back to the attacker will be 15,000. So this is important to note that the unit must survive the attack to reflect back the damage. If an enemy attack your party where everyone have reflective trap level 2 applied, the damage that is dealt on the party will be all reflected back to the attacker with -4 SP deduction. This is the main reason why you will want Zora's skill page. Before I proceed to talk about his kit, let me briefly explain the fundamentals of building a good team comp. In general, every good team comp needs a balanced set of characters playing their various roles. To be honest, bringing a full team of attacker mages won't get you to clear endgame content. Don't expect Zora to do a lot of damage with his skills. His key utility is to protect your party with his strategic reflective trap that allows you to reflect the damage back to the attacker. Other than that, he can also drain SP of the opposition with his skill 2, which is very handy in arena fights. To upgrade the skills, you need to use will shards. Will shards can be brought at the world regional shops monthly. If you upgrade your world reputation to level 2, you will unlock the option to buy the highest tier upgrade material. If you haven't done so, I will suggest you to start leveling up the reputation level by doing bond patrol or memory hall fights for that specific world. You can also get skills upgrade materials at your squad shop if you have joined a squad. You can buy them weekly with guild medals or monthly with guild raid coins. So try to level up and join a guild. If you have spending power, you can buy skills enhancement chests at the premium Black Crystal shop. Now let me go through his skill set. His skill 1 Ash Magic Bullet is a single target attack which grants the mage with the highest all attack stats, his reflective trap level 1 buff for 2 turns. Upgrading the skills will improve the damage potencies. His non-attacking skill 2 Set Trap has a 60% chance of granting the party debuff immunity, reduces all enemies SP by 1 and inflict a magic attack reduction level 1 debuff on all enemies. Magic attack reduction level 1 will reduces enemies magic attack by 35%. Upgrading the skill to max enhancement guarantee the debuff immunity activation. If you have his skill page, the skill will apply his reflective trap level 2 to the party for 1 turn. His non-attacking special trap production is a single target support ability. Upon using the skill on the targeted mage, Zora will grants the targeted ally the reflective trap level 3 buff for 2 turns. The ability will have 60% chance of granting the ally increased defense level 5 buff for 2 turns while inflict weapon disarm level 3 on the enemy with the highest all attack. Upgrading the skill to max enhancement will guarantee the activation of increased defense buff. His combined attack is a single target attack with the partner mage that removes the immortality buff from the target. This is good for tackling units that have immortality mechanics. In general, do make an effort to invest and upgrade the skill's damage potencies and you will reap the benefit a lot. Unlike most mages, upgrading his skills don't give any damage boost, but it helps to improve the probability of his buff's activation. 60% chance is quite decent. If you get it to level 3 or 2 level enhancements, you have an 80% chance, which is good for most content. Ideally, you want to max out his special first, since survivability is important for hit and counter setups. The time on when to use which skills is depending on the current battle situation. As such, Zora doesn't have any fixed skill rotation. For example, in Arena, if you facing a Mirioliana partnered with William in Arena, you will want to use skill 2 first instead of his special, so you can reflect the damage from the AoE combo attack. Now let's cover on his skill page. Zora's skill page allows him to have 40% chance of granting a 20% increased defense buff to all allies for 2 turns when he was attacked by the enemy. At max enhancement, you will have a guaranteed chance of activating the increased defense buff, and the potencies will improve from 20% to 50% as well. Unless you are targeting the upper leagues and have big spending power, I won't recommend you to chase too hard for the dupes of the skill page. You can end up hurting your resources to pull for the upcoming units. It is very important to have Zora to be equipped with his own skill page. Without the skill page, you will lose the utility of his reflective trap level 2, and only his skill 1 and special gives a single target traps. If you are desperate and still want to use him, you can refer to the screen for alternate options. To be honest, if I don't get his skill page, I will let him sit on the bench and rot to death. Now let's cover on his talents. To understand what is the best talent settings, you need to know what is the mage's primary role. Zora is a defensive debuffer. For his attack talent wheel, I would suggest giving his increased battle frenzy and increased magic attack. Increased magic attack will increase his magic attack stats by 7%. For the other talent, Battle Frenzy will be the better option, since it allows him to gain 2.5% increased critical rate buff that could stack up to 5 times. For the talent Craved Stone, I would suggest you give him the Accuracy Talent Stone to boost his survivability. For the Defense Talent Wheel, I recommend you to go for the Endurance Defensive Talent, which gives his 4% defense and 2% critical resistance, up to 5 times per wave, along with increased defense that boost his defense by 20%. For the Craved Stone, you will want to give him the Defense Talent Craved Stone. In the Support Talent Wheel, you will have a wide variety of options like one shown on the screen. Increased damage resistance will result Zora to improve his damage resistance by 10%. Mage Blessing allows his to have a 20% chance of cool down his skill 2, which could allow him to apply his skill 2 faster. This will help a lot in ensuring Zora will be able to use his skill 2 for the Reflective Trap level 2 buff. It is worth noting that his skill 2 has a longer cooldown of 3 turns compared to most mages. I myself will probably go with the combo of increased damage resistance with Mage Blessing, so he can apply his AoE Reflective Trap buff more frequently. You can also opt to use increased accuracy and penetration to enhance his damage potencies. Penetration stats is good for handling enemies with high defenses. Whenever your mage attacks, a certain portion of the target's defense is ignored when damage is dealt based on the character's penetration stat. On the other hand, accuracy will helps to boost Zora's survivability, as it allows him to have higher chance of damage reduction activation. For the Support Talent Wheel, you need to give him the Speed Stone. Speed is important to allow Zora to set his traps before opposition mages could act. If you have Zora built, it will be highly likely that you will be using him in your arena teams. So focus on maxing out both the defense and support talent wheels. Now let's focus on his gear sets. Generally, you want to target for advanced gear sets pieces. For PvP, you want to use the full advanced speed set with the small attack and defense piece from the advanced defense set. Speed is important for PvP. If Zora don't have his turns to use his buffs, your party will still get killed anyway. The set can be farmed at the Red Power Gear dungeon. If you don't have enough pieces of that, you can temporarily slot in full defense pieces to make him tanky. Remember, the longer that Zora survive, the higher chances he could apply his reflective traps buffs and thus ensure your party survivability. You can refer to the middle and gear set on the right for references. For substats, you should prioritize on defense percent, critical resistance percent and damage resistance substats. If you previously built Black Asta gear but didn't build his critical rate and critical damage, those gear pieces can be used for Zora. You can also further boost his survivability by equipping him with defense main stats accessories. You can also give him the advanced gear dungeon gear pieces like Snowfield Warrior gear pieces from Advanced Sense gear dungeon or the Abandoned Friends gear pieces from the gear selection chest. If you planning to build the counter-attack mono blue team comp with Ceremony Luck and Party William, the Nostalgia of Grief gear sets could be useful as well. On the screen, you can see samples of how Zora can be used to clear both PvE and PvP content. For PvE, he can easily turn the tide of the battle by reflecting damage back to the bosses. Of course, in order to reflect back the damage, your party still need to survive the attack first. Reflect damage can come in clutch and make your task of clearing endgame PvE content easier. For PvP, this is the area where Zora will become a difference maker. To date, he is still one of the better blue mages for PvP in JP and KR. You can deploy him in a mono blue team comp to take advantage of his increased speed buff so you can get the first turn to set the traps before your opposition attack. If you are going with the mono blue team, make sure you target the next seasonal mage Clover Academy Noelle in the upcoming season. She is a wonderful healer mage for that team with her AoE damage over time removal utility. Zora also excels in non-mono blue team comps. In general, he pairs well with defender mages or any mages that have taunt mechanic. So taunt will result the target to be locked to the target. Zora can just apply his trap and the enemy will deal reduced damage while suffering from his reflect damage. It is easier to identify who to apply single target traps. When using hit and counter setups, having an in-depth understanding on what your opposition is able to do is important. For example, the AI always program opposition Black Asta or Julius to target the highest all-attack mage in your PvP party. When you are sensing an incoming heavy attack, have Zora apply his reflective traps on them.